Hello everybody, Cirlce here, and today we are looking at the circle. And at the end of this video, you should be able to do a few things. One, you should be able to label the parts of the circle, and you should be able to identify the parts of the circle from various diagrams. So of course this lesson should be a recap lesson because you should have some amount of knowledge about the circle. So let's head into the first part. So the first part is the center. Now the center of the circle, now this is a fixed point from which every point on the circle is equal. And this is usually denoted by the letter O. O stands for origin, and origin is normally the center of everything. So the center is simply that, as the name says, the center of the circle. So if you have a circle here, the center will just be here. And it's usually denoted by the letter O, and that is the center. So the next part is the radius. So the radius is a line segment joining the center of the circle to any point on the circle. Now all radii of a circle are equal in length. So of course, to get the radius, we must first identify the center of the circle. So here would be the center, and the radii would be a line drawn from the center to the circumference. And that would be the radii. And if we draw another line from the center again to another part in the circle, what this is saying is that these two radii will be equal. So one radius more than one radii. So these two radii should be equal. And if you draw another radii, all three of them should be equal. So remember, the distance from the center to the circle is the same right throughout the circle. So now let's look at the diameter. So the diameter is a line segment that passes through the center of the circle and both has endpoints on the circle. So a better way to think about this definition, the diameter is a line drawn from the circle, passes through the center, and then goes to the other end of the circle. It's a straight line. So first thing, let's identify the center. So let's say there is a center. The diameter will be a line that passes through the center, drawn from one end, passes through the center, and then goes to the other end of the circle. And that is the diameter. So the next thing we should know about the diameter is that the diameter is 2 radii. Because remember, the diameter starts from the circle, it goes to the center, that is one radius. Then it goes from the center to the circle, and that is another radius. So the diameter will be 2 radii. So the next part would be the circumference. So the circumference is the distance around the circle. So all here would be, we would consider to be the circumference, is the distance around the circle. And if you want to think about it in terms of the perimeter, if you want to find this distance, this is calculated using the formula 2 pi r or pi d. But for this video, we just know that the circumference is the distance around the circle. So the next one would be the arc. So the arc is a part of the circumference of the circle. Now, the arc can be a minor arc or it can be a major arc. So just now we learned that the circumference is the distance around the circle. So the arc, you can consider the arc to be just a piece on the circumference. So this part would be the arc of the circle. So this says you can have two arcs. So in this case, this arc would be the minor arc. That is the smaller arc. And the blue part of the circle would be the major arc. Now let's look at the chord. Now the chord is a line segment with both endpoints on the circle. Now the largest chord is the diameter. So for the diameter, the line had to pass through the center from one end of the circle to the other end. But for the chord, it doesn't need to pass through the center. I mean, if it passes through, it will still be considered a chord, but this can be a chord. So the two endpoints are on the circle. So this here is what we call a chord. So the line drawn from one end of the circle to another end of the circle or the circumference. And it also said that the largest chord is the diameter. So of course, if we use some amount of common sense, and if we pass through the center, then that chord will definitely be the longest indeed. So the next thing we want to deal with is the sector. So the sector of the circle is defined as the region between, or the region enclosed by 2 radii and the arc between them. So an example to think of the sector, you want to think of a slice of pizza. So when you take out a slice of pizza from the entire pizza, from the whole pizza, that slice is what we call a sector. If you take out 2 slices, that is also a sector. The remaining pizza, that is also a sector of the circle. To get the sector of the circle, here we have the center, and then we just draw 2 radii to this center. So we consider this part here to be the sector of the circle. So we can have 2 sectors. One will be the major sector and the minor sector. So of course, the minor sector would be the smaller part of the sector, and the major one would be the remaining bigger part. So remember, the sector of a circle is like a slice of pizza. So the next one we want to look at is the segment. So the segment is the region of a circle enclosed by a chord and an arc. So we can have a minor segment or a major segment. So first of all, we need to draw a chord. So the chord is a line that separates the 2 segments. So this is the chord. And on one side of the chord, this space here we call is the segment. We also call this part a segment as well. So of course, the larger one will be the major segment, and the smaller portion will be the minor segment. So a chord separates the 2 segments, and the space we will call the segment. So the next one is the tangent of the circle. So the tangent is a straight line that touches the circle at 1 point exactly 1 point. So the tangent is perpendicular to the radius at the point of contact. Now this is a relationship we will explore in future videos, but this is just something we should know as well. So the tangent is a line outside of the circle that just touches 1 part of the circumference. 1 part of the circle, probably at this point here. And we also learned that, let's say we have the center here. The point of contact between the tangent, the part of the tangent that touches the circle, and the radius, the point between there is perpendicular, meaning it adds up to 90 degrees. So that is the tangent. The tangent is a straight line that just touches on 1 part of the circle. So next one we want is the central angle. So the central angle is an angle formed at the center of the circle by 2 radii. So let's just say we have here as the center. The central angle would be an angle formed at the center. So here would be the central angle. And last but not least, we have the inscribed angle or the circumference angle. So this is an angle formed at a point on the circle by 2 chords. So unlike the center angle, this one is formed on the circumference. You can have an angle being formed here. So this angle here is what we call the inscribed angle. So this angle is formed at the circumference of the circle. So I have an exercise to do. So in this exercise, we have a diagram being shown. And what we want to do for the diagram is to identify the different parts of the circle on the diagram. So I have 3 statements that we want to complete, and we have 6 words. So we'll put in which word fits the description in the sentence. So we have the arc, the diameter, the chord, the tangent, the circumference, and the radius. And the first sentence that we have to complete is the straight line AC is something of the circle. So we see A is here and C is here. So A line passes through the center and go to another end of the circle. So we see the straight line AC. We call that the diameter. The next one, the straight line OD is a something of the circle. The straight line OD is a something of the circle. So OD, so we go OD. So we see we start from O and we go to D. So we see that is the radius of the circle. And last but not least, the straight line BC. The straight line BC is a something of the circle. So we see the straight line BC would be the chord of the circle. So BC would be, it passes from one end of the circle to the other end. So we see that to be the chord. So if you got all three of these correct, that means you have a good understanding, a solid understanding of the parts of the circle. So with that, this has brought me to the end of this video. I trust that you have a good understanding of identifying the parts of the circle, because this is the foundational knowledge that we must use in the future videos. So until then, take care.